Alright guys, people have asked for this in the past, someone asked for it again. So here's a compilation of like all of my ATVs. This covers 2012 to like 2017. Everyone knows I started with the Honda 300, that's kind of what got the channel going. Here's my 300 in one of its final forms. That's the original 300 by the way. This thing was built, 380 big bore kit, it had nitrous on it, stack exhaust. It actually made good power. It's doing donuts on 31 Outlaw wides right there. But I have a ton of videos of 300, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. I did some crazy stuff. I made portals for the front of it. Chain-driven portals is one of the first portals anyone ever had on an ATV. I never got around to finishing the rear because I got busy with life. But it was a pretty cool setup. There's a couple of videos on that if you're interested. But that 300 was an absolute tank. I made a custom rack, custom bumper, custom winch mount. I put a ton of time into this thing when I was a kid. I actually got this thing when I was like 14, and I built it, for 7 or 8 years. So I spent a lot of time abusing this thing. It went through a ton of top ends. Somehow the crank survived. But, Honda 300's awesome. I'm a little too old for them now, a little too big, and like a little more comfort. But, man, they are extremely potent with a torque locker. The problem with 300 now, the reason I won't build another one is because you can't get the 2x4 lockout. People ask all the time. They're just not available. And the torque locker is available, but without the lockout, it's kind of useless. So, yeah, no more 300s, but I do love them. Here's the first Rubicon I got. It's 2015, so it's the first Honda IRS machine, independent rear suspension, that actually had low gears. Everyone knows the Rivicon's kind of a turd. This thing is awesome. It's 10 years out of date now, and it's still probably the best ATV on the market. I ran on everything from Crush Locks to Black Mambas, V-Treads, you name it. They're just an awesome platform. They're obviously a little underpowered because they're a Honda. The four-wheel drive system is kind of finicky. It gets water in, it flashes. Here's my biggest version of it, 34.5 Outlaws, 5-inch catboats lift, and a 3.5-inch subframe stretch that I made. Of course, the problem with these Rubicons is that the drive shafts and the U-joints are weak, so when you go this big, they just break. It only lasted about 30 minutes on this ride, and it got parked, and I ended up on my big red. But it was extremely capable when it worked. Also, the catboat lift has no rake because it's a very stupid lift, and it uses very stupid Turner axles that blew up every time I rode them. Apparently, you can't trail ride Turner axles. They're only made for mud holes. They overheat, the boots explode like balloons, and then that's been a problem for years. So we don't mess with Turners anymore. But yeah, so there's me on my three-wheeler because my monster Rubicon broke down. This is one of the only clips I have of it, really, from that day going through any mud. Obviously, it's extremely badass, but pretty worthless. Later on, I got a couple other Rubicons and put them on portals. I've had 6 Rubicons now and 11 Honda 300s. So we're not going to talk about them too much in this video because I've had too many of them. Here's the dualies on that same machine. I also crossed lakes with it and stuff, but this is just messing around in South Carolina. A lot of these videos from South Carolina, by the way. I'll try to tell you where they're at as I'm doing the videos. But yeah, I put dualies on it. I was one of the first people to do that as well, and it was really effective. That's a really bad mud hole. You just kind of float across the top. What else to tell you about the Rubicon? I'll probably buy another one because they're still very relevant and still very good. Yeah. Okay. Next thing I bought was a, it's an order from here on forward. So this was after my 300. I got a 250sx three-wheeler. I didn't know much about them at the time. I just love three-wheelers. I grew up on them, so I bought one. This one is kind of disadvantaged compared to the Big Red. From the factory, it has a higher geared rear differential, has a goofy swing arm stretch setup, and it's a very short wheelbase. So it's not a great mud machine, but it is a very fun bike. It's supposed to be like a hybrid utility sport, right? Shaft drive, but still kind of sporty. By the way, I've had a ton of sport quads too. My first quad was actually a 300EX, but I'm not putting those in this video. I've had a bunch of those and 400EXs and 450Rs and all that stuff. But yeah, here's me hammered on my 250SX on Vampires. We thought those were good tires back in the day before we discovered things like Outlaws and Aztecs and, that sort of stuff. But all my friends had a good time on this 250SX. It was kind of the loner bike, and everyone just beat the crap out of it, and it just kept ticking. Really fun machine. The engines run great, and I couldn't say enough good things about these three-wheelers. I mean, everyone just had fun with it, and it never complained. We never even snorkeled it. We just abused the crap out of it. That Rubicon right there is my original Rubicon. Travis still has it, the one on the right side of the screen. So we'll probably be getting that thing out of the shed and riding it again soon. Okay, here's my King Quad 300. So this was the next thing I bought after that SX. It's cool because it's geared extremely low. It's got high, low, and super low in the transmission, front differential lock, and it's got independent rear suspension, so that's kind of cool. The problem with the King Quad 300, like the 570 Polaris, is that the engine's really far back, so the weight distribution sucks. Here's Stephanie going deep with it. This is a quiet place in the country where we used to ride. It's kind of like by Daytona area. But this thing was a tank. Well, I put a 300X carburetor on it, finally got it snorkeled. The factory airbox and carburetor were kind of crap. But once we worked through that issue, My screen just went out. Once we worked through that issue, it was pretty reliable and it worked good. What finally killed this thing was putting real tires on it. So these little V-treads are very easy to spin. And we have figured out pretty quick that V-treads suck on four-wheelers. People still run them, but small V-treads don't work, guys. Get better tires. So once I put some Outlaws on it, it started blowing axles like crazy. Then I blew the front diff. Then I fixed that. And then it ripped the front diff off the frame because the frame mounts were weak. And then it rusted out and it just kind of died. It also had a winch front and rear, so that was its party trick. I could cross a creek without actually going in the water. All in all, it wasn't a very good mud machine. It was great for pulling people out. It had tractor gears. The rear suspension was like a single A-arm independent, so it was kind of wonky, but you know, it had decent clearance, I guess. But it wasn't nearly as capable as the Hondas, so it quickly became a loaner bike for my friends to ride and got destroyed. All right, here's one of my favorite things of all time. This is a big red atc250es three-wheeler. This is my favorite three-wheeler ever made. It is my favorite Honda engine ever made. All my friends will tell you they have the same ones. The big red just runs good. We don't know why it runs so good. We swapped this cam into 300s and it makes a difference, but a stock big red has more power than a stock 300 despite having smaller displacement, and 300s just rock. The super strong rear axle, really low gears in it. This is the axle everyone swaps into the 300. Here's me riding my SX to go rescue my big red. Actually, I was by myself, but I had two machines luckily. But I fell in love with this big red right off the bat. Did a bunch of experimenting with different tires on it. This tire right here, if you look at it, I cut it to make it kind of like an Assassinator. So, not Assassinator, excuse me, an Aztec. So this is like kind of the original Aztec, if you ask me. There's my snorkel job, though. I had dual snorkels on it, still breathing through the frame, and you could steer it. It was super sweet. I just love this machine. Shouldn't have sold it. I've actually had three now. One of them my buddy sold me, and then I got it running, and then he wanted it back because he missed it so much. And I was like, of course, come get your big red. You know, we all love big reds. I will probably try to buy another one in the future. They're my favorite Honda ever made, probably. So yeah, if you have a big red, don't let it go. Maintain it. They're just great. Something about the way the suspension works and the maneuverability, and they're actually pretty comfortable. They're not very light, but they just go everywhere and they run really good. And yeah, I just love a big red. Don't lift them, by the way. We've tried that. It just ruins them. You can't lift a three-wheeler and have it still be rideable. They barely work as it is. That's it on some fatty 29.5 Outlaws. Here's the big red on some 34.5 Outlaw 2s. I always ran an 18% gear reduction in the big red. It's two-wheel drive, so you didn't need a huge gear reduction. And like I said, the engine just runs better than it should. So it puts out a lot of torque. There's in the back of my first Silverado, my 2015. That's a great truck with a 5.3. I actually just bought another 5.3 Silverado because I love this one so much. But anyway, yeah, big reds are awesome. That's the last clip of the big red. Okay, here's my 2008 Foreman 500 foot shift. These are great four-wheelers, except the first gear is really weak. So I stripped out the first gear like the first ride, and that was the first time I split the case. And then I did double gear reduction. I had a 15% in the front that was welded and a 15% in the rear that was welded. Of course, the rear welded reduction exploded, and then I had to rebuild it and crack the case, get all the metal out of it for the second time. And then I didn't have a rear reduction in it, so I put a welded 35% primary reduction. That exploded, so I split the case the third time. And then I put a solid reduction in the rear, and that exploded. So this thing had multiple gear reductions explode in it, eventually took the motor out. But before all that happened, I did put nitrous on it, which was pretty cool. Had a wet system on there, and I had it all wired up with lights to, you know, indicate fuel pressure, and it had an arming switch and a wide open throttle switch in the handlebar. I might mess with this again soon. Nitrous on a Honda is actually kind of fun. It would be kind of fun to do on my Foreman, especially because now that the Foreman's fuel injected, to be a little bit easier. This one had to run a fuel pump because it was carbureted. But these old 500s put out a lot more power than they should have for an air-cooled carbureted engine. They were a really big step up from the 300s and the 450 Foremans, so we all loved them. Unfortunately, they had a weak first gear. But you could put a 450 swing arm on this with some modifications for a swing arm stretch, and we all did that, and it was pretty cool. Here is my Big Bear 400 IRS. This was a great quad. It was kind of a loaner quad because I had a couple other ones I like better. But there's my 200X, actually. It snuck into this video. But this is my Big Bear, so again, like the Suzuki, I put a 300X carburetor on it because everything runs better with a 300X carburetor. Yamaha carburetor was crap. And I snorkeled it, and I threw some Mudzillas, not Zillas, Mudzillas. So there's like the heavy 30 Mudzillas, and as you'll see here, like most Yamahas, it's just not geared low enough to be really effective. Yamaha purposely gears their machines high so they don't have enough torque to break axles, so people think they're reliable. And Yamahas are reliable, but they're just not geared low enough for real mud machines. That's why you don't see me mess with Grizzlies too much. Just they're geared high. The Big Red was really fun. It had a independent rear suspension. It had a good front locker, and it did well and stuff like this. It just couldn't turn an aggressive mud tire like an Outlaw or even really those Mudzillas very well. If I put one on some 28 Aztecs now, it would probably be a really fun rig, but they're hard to find. The Big Red IRS, they didn't sell a ton of them, and it was only for a couple years, but it was still a foot shift Yamaha, so that was awesome. All right, now, oh, here's my 200X again. I don't know how it keeps sneaking into this video, but I did love my 86 200X. These are just some old random clips, by the way, on YouTube. This is from like 2012 to 2017, like I said in the beginning. Rocking out some wheelies at Holopal on the 200X. That's not really the point of this video. I'm not sure why I put that in here, but I'm not changing it. So yeah, this is how I used to go to Holopal, by the way. Trailer loaded down with quads, and all my friends would break them for me. So that's like the 500 Foreman, the 300, and everything else here. That's my 350DD. So that was the next thing I bought. This is up in Charleston, South Carolina. I was stationed up there. Fuck the Navy. And yeah, so that's me cutting some, I think they're Maxxis Rubicon tires, and I'm cutting them to make them look like an Aztec, which is kind of ironic because that's all I run now. And they work pretty well like that, but of course they're balloon tires. So this thing was pretty clean when I got it, and I just destroyed it and beat the crap out of it. Dual snorkels, put some 30-inch V-treads on it right here on some car steelies. The 350D is a great machine. The problem with it is it's solid front axle, so it has no side-to-side flex. It has no cross-axle flex. And by no, I mean zero cross-axle flex. Also, it's very limited on steering because it has a front swing arm, so you're constantly the tire into the swing arm, which is a buzzkill. Also, it doesn't have a front locker, and it always picks up a tire, so a lot of times it's kind of two-wheel drive. That being said, I love 350DD. Now, here's it on crushed 32.5 Outlaw 2s. It's got one of the best motors Honda's ever made. It's actually a 4-valve head. It rips. The problem is the solid axle in the front. They're strong and they're robust, but once I welded the front spider gears, or I think I shimmed it to lock up the front diff, I did start breaking the little half CV axles it has up front. So, I don't know. The rear axle's indestructible. It's geared extremely low. You can make a gear reduction for it with some 300X gears yourself. Actually, no. 300fw gears you can use for a 15% gear reduction. 300X gears, I think, give you a 35% gear reduction, and then you can do a 69% reduction as well. I made some of those. There's some videos on that. But this thing went everywhere. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a really cheap building. I bought the machine for $600. Okay, here's my 2016 Outlander 570L. This is my first like fast quad. This was a V-twin 570. This is stock tires, obviously getting stuck. And I really liked it until it started breaking. So, and also, as you can see here, Visco-Lock sucks. It's basically 3-wheel drive. So I actually had a Gen 1 Can-Am, and that was before I started making videos, and it was an absolute piece of crap. It never ran, so I don't even have any footage of it regardless. Frame broke in half. But anyway, this Gen 2, frame did not break in half, but it had almost every other possible problem. So second ride, transmission stripped out, then the rear diff blew up, then it started blowing through belts because it was geared too high. Obviously, yes, I'm hard on things, but I'm equally hard on everything, and this thing really couldn't hang. The computer got water in it and fried itself because why would the computer be sealed like every other ATV? This was definitely kind of a lemon. I know other Gen 2s are better than this one, but it was a real piece of shit. I put CV Tech clutches in it, tuned them properly, and it was a lot of fun once I got it tuned. It would, you know, rip around, do donuts, burnouts. I ran 29.5 Outlaw 1 skinnies on it. It was a wheelie machine, and I like the 570 engine. It revs really freely. It's very fast. What finally killed it was when the second rear diff blew out, I decided to sell it because I was only running 29.5 Outlaw 1s, and then any diff should handle that. So, yeah, fuck that thing. If it can't handle a tire that essentially measures a 28, that's very light, it's not good enough to keep in my arsenal. So I had a lot of issues with it, and I got some other Can-Ams, but that's going to be in the later video, like after 2017. Here's when I first bought it, and I was looking it over. The rear diff made a whining noise straight from the factory, just, you know, typical Can-Am. I always think Can-Am has some kind of cool engineering, but they always have really shitty build quality. And that's kind of the case with every Can-Am I bought. The Gen 3s are better, but yeah. Anyway, about done yapping about this thing. I really hated it, and it stressed me out, and it was a piece of crap. It was fun when it worked, though. All right, this next one is my Polaris 900 RZR Trail. I bought this in 2016 as well. The reason I bought it was because it was a very narrow wheelbase side-by-side. I like narrow technical trails. I don't like wide-open stuff. And it's very moddable. So portals were available for it. So these are the Gen 1 Super ATV 4-inch portals, which were crap, by the way. Super ATV still hates me because I had so many issues with these things, and I documented it very well, and they don't like the truth. But these portals were terrible. Shafts snapped off. They leaked. You know, just all kinds of issues with these portals. But when they did work, it was very effective. These are 33 wide V-treads, BKT 171s. Like I said, BKTs work good on side-by-sides, because especially the bigger sizes, like 33 and up, but they're crap on ATVs. People should stop doing that. But yeah, I took this thing deep all the time. It had some electrical problems. The real problem with this RZR was that the reverse chain blew out. So then I built the transmission with ACE 325 gears, and it had a lot of torque after that. And then once I made more torque, the front end started going out. So it went through 2 front ends in the time I had it, and actually 2 transmissions. Polaris stuff. And the belt was very hard to get sealed. I had to pull the belt box off multiple times to get everything sealed properly. But when it worked, it was really capable. So this is some 34.5 Outlaw 2s on Ford Focus wheels I put on there with the portals. And with this setup, it was nearly unstoppable unless you needed reverse, because then it would break the reverse chain. And it also broke the snorkel gear one time. So the Polaris driveline is kind of crap with the snorkel gear setup. They've been keeping that design around forever. No one knows why. It's terrible. This thing was really, really high maintenance. Oh, I actually had to rebuild the engine at one time too. It blew a head gasket. So I don't know. It was a very high maintenance machine. When it worked, it impressed people and it went a lot of places. But coming from Hondas, just the amount of work you do on Polaris, changing bushings constantly and seals and shaft splines wearing out. None of the shafts are sealed. It was a nightmare. And of course, yes, I'm abusive, right? Look at this. It's in a lake. It actually idled in that lake for an hour while I ran back to my truck to get my Rubicon to pull myself out, because I was the only person in the park on this day. So I always have had weird days off work. But yeah, so, stupid stuff I do, but I do this to everything. And the Hondas and the Yamahas just take it a lot better than these other machines. They're just not sealed well. But yeah, so RZR 900 Trail, pretty good. I won't touch another Polaris for the mud unless they totally redesign that transmission. But I did have a lot of fun with it. And there's tons of videos on that build if you're interested.